Throughout history, there have been countless stories of people who simply vanished, leaving behind shattered families, unanswered questions, and trails of evidence that seem to lead nowhere. These cases are some of the most haunting mysteries of all time, not just because they remain unsolved, but because of the disturbing details that surround them. From children who disappeared in broad daylight, to travelers who never reached their destination, to entire groups of people who seemed to dissolve into thin air, these disappearances challenge our understanding of safety, truth, and even reality itself. Each case we're about to explore carries its own chilling weight, filled with strange clues, contradictory witness statements, and eerie circumstances that refuse to make sense. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this: every one of these people had lives, routines, and loved ones. Then, in a single moment, they were gone forever. These are the stories of those who vanished without a trace. Brandon Lawson's case has become one of the most widely discussed modern missing persons mysteries, not only because of the strange circumstances surrounding his disappearance, but also because of the disturbing 911 call he made that night, one that has been analyzed, replayed, and dissected by countless investigators and true crime enthusiasts over the years, yet still yields no definitive answers. On the night of August 8, 2013, Brandon, a 26-year-old father from Texas, called his brother Kyle to say that he was on his way over. Reports indicate that Brandon and his longtime girlfriend, Ladessa Lofton, had been arguing earlier in the evening, which was not unusual but seemed particularly intense that night. After leaving his home near San Angelo, Brandon began driving north on U.S. Route 277 toward his father's residence. Sometime around midnight, Brandon ran out of gas in a rural stretch of highway near Bronte, Texas, a lonely area with sparse traffic, wide-open plains, and very little in the way of nearby resources. It was here, in this desolate setting, that the events of that night spiraled into a nightmare of confusion and disappearance. Shortly after his truck ran out of gas, Brandon called his brother for help, explaining that he was stranded and needed fuel. Kyle agreed to come, but before he arrived, Brandon placed a frantic call to 911 at 12:50 a.m. The call, which lasted less than a minute, has since become the centerpiece of the mystery. In the audio recording, Brandon can be heard speaking in a panicked and hurried voice, saying something along the lines of, "Yes, I'm in the middle of a field. Inaudible. We're safe here. Just push some guys over. Right here going toward Abilene on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. One car chased me into the woods. Please hurry." The audio is garbled and difficult to interpret. Some words are clear, others sound distorted, and interpretations of the call vary wildly. But one thing is obvious: Brandon believed he was in immediate danger. When Kyle arrived at the location, he found Brandon's truck abandoned on the side of the road. The vehicle's doors were unlocked, and inside were Brandon's wallet, keys, and cell phone charger. Brandon himself was nowhere to be found. Police were already on the scene, having been alerted by a passing motorist who reported a truck obstructing part of the roadway. According to Kyle, Brandon called him at approximately 1:18 a.m. and told him that he was 10 minutes up the road and was bleeding. This call, like others that night, was frustratingly cut short or distorted due to poor reception in the remote area. Brandon reportedly made several additional attempts to call Ladessa and Kyle, but communication was fragmented and confusing. He was never seen again. What makes Brandon's disappearance particularly unsettling is the fact that there were multiple calls placed, not just to 911 but also to family members, and in nearly every one Brandon seems terrified, claiming that someone is after him. The identity of this supposed pursuer, or whether there even was one, remains unknown. The official police response to the case has been heavily criticized, as it is believed that they initially treated Brandon as someone who might have been hiding or evading authorities, rather than as a person in immediate danger. Search efforts were not fully coordinated until days later, and by then, any trace evidence that might have been present was likely destroyed by weather, animals, or passing traffic. Theories abound regarding what happened to Brandon that night. Some suggest that he was hallucinating due to drugs. It was later revealed that Brandon had a history of substance use, and some family members speculated that he may have been under the influence of methamphetamines, which can cause paranoia and disorientation. Others, however, strongly reject this explanation, pointing out that Brandon's words in the 911 call, while frantic, did not sound delusional, but instead indicated a genuine fear of pursuit. Supporters of this theory also point out that Brandon was a father and would not simply choose to vanish, especially not in such a dangerous, unplanned way. Another theory is that Brandon encountered foul play, perhaps stumbling across criminal activity in the rural fields near where his truck broke down. Some believe he may have witnessed something he wasn't supposed to see, such as a drug deal or other illicit exchange, and was chased and silenced. The mention in his 911 call of chasing me into the woods lends weight to this possibility, though no suspects have ever been identified, and no evidence has been uncovered to support the claim. Then there are those who suggest Brandon may have succumbed to the harsh elements of the Texas wilderness. That night, temperatures dropped low, and the terrain was difficult. If Brandon had run into the fields, confused and frightened, he could have easily become lost. Some believe that dehydration, exhaustion, or even injury from stumbling through rough ground may have led to his collapse. The strange phone calls, in this view, are seen less as evidence of foul play and more as a reflection of disorientation and panic. Yet searches of the area have never turned up conclusive remains, only occasional reports of unidentified bones or fragments that, when tested, failed to match Brandon's DNA. The most unsettling part of Brandon's story is the way it simply stops. After the final calls around 1:30 a.m., there is nothing. His phone was never used again, no bank accounts were touched, and no credible sightings have been reported. His family continues to search for answers, organizing private searches, and maintaining awareness campaigns online. They cling to hope, but also acknowledge the growing likelihood that Brandon met with tragedy that night. The 911 call remains at the center of speculation. Different listeners have produced different transcripts, Some hear, "We just pushed some guys over," while others claim he says, "I just ran into them," or "I ran into some Mexicans," or "I ran into some men." Each version carries different implications. Was Brandon describing an accident, a fight, or a random encounter? Was he alone, or was someone else with him? Did he stumble upon an already unfolding event? The inability to definitively clarify the words has fueled endless debate, ensuring that Brandon's disappearance continues to haunt those who study it. NFOR Brandon's family, the pain is sharpened by the absence of closure. Unlike other cold cases where at least remains are recovered, Brandon's complete disappearance leaves endless room for speculation, and every new lead, however minor, reignites their hope. In 2022, human remains were found in a field near where Brandon disappeared, and though early speculation suggested they might be his, testing eventually showed they were not. The case remains unsolved, and the mystery of what really happened that night, whether Brandon was pursued by strangers, fell victim to the environment, or was overwhelmed by his own demons, remains a chilling enigma. What we are left with is a story that embodies the terror of vanishing without a trace. Brandon Lawson was a real man with children, a partner, and a family who loved him. He got into his truck one night, drove down a lonely Texas highway, and after a series of desperate phone calls, he was never seen again. His story continues to circulate because it resonates with our deepest fears. That danger can appear suddenly, without reason, in the most ordinary of places, and that a single wrong turn or a single moment of bad luck can lead to someone stepping off the edge of the map and into oblivion. For many, Brandon's voice on that 911 call still echoes, a distorted cry for help in the middle of nowhere, a frozen record of fear that no one could reach in time. And perhaps that's why his case, like so many others we'll explore, continues to haunt us. Because it forces us to face the possibility that sometimes people really can vanish without a trace, and that the silence they leave behind can be even louder than any answer. In the blistering summer of January 26, 1966, the city of Adelaide, Australia, witnessed a tragedy that would haunt not only the nation, but the world for decades to come. On that warm holiday, 3 siblings, Jane, 9, Arna, 7, and Grant Beaumont, 4, set off from their home in Somerton Park to spend the day at Glenelg Beach, a popular seaside destination only a short bus ride away. They had been there many times before, often without their parents, as this was considered a safe and friendly era, a time when children could wander neighborhoods and beaches freely without fear. But on that fateful day, the Beaumont children never returned, leaving behind a mystery that remains unsolved nearly 60 years later, and becoming one of Australia's most enduring cold cases. NTHE children's mother, Nancy, waved them goodbye as they boarded the bus around 10 a.m., clutching coins for bus fare and some change to buy treats. Their father, Jim, was away at work. Witnesses later recalled seeing the 3 children happily playing in the shallow surf of Glenelg Beach. They were described as polite, well-behaved, and inseparable, Jane often playing the role of the little caretaker, holding the hands of her younger siblings. They were last seen by a shopkeeper at Wenzel's Bakery, where Jane used the exact coins her mother had given them to purchase pasties and a meat pie. The shopkeeper remembered this detail vividly because Jane seemed remarkably confident for her age, ordering with the poise of an adult. That moment in the bakery would become the last confirmed sighting of the children alive. What disturbed investigators was not only their disappearance, but also the witness accounts that followed. Several beachgoers recalled seeing the children with a tall, lean, blond man who appeared to be in his mid-30s. He seemed friendly, relaxed, and at ease with the children, so much so that no one thought it unusual. Some even believed the children already knew him. He played with them in the shallows, helped them dry off, and was seen lying on the grass nearby while the children frolicked around him. This man has never been identified, and to this day remains the most crucial missing piece of the puzzle. By late afternoon, when the children failed to return home on the 2 p.m. bus as promised, Nancy began to worry. By 3 p.m., her concern grew into panic. She began phoning friends and neighbors, then went to the bus stop herself. By evening, Jim Beaumont returned from work to a distraught household. They combed the beach themselves before reporting the children missing. The police launched what was, at that time, one of the largest search efforts in Australian history. Helicopters scoured the coastline, divers searched the waters, and officers went door to door across Adelaide. But there was no trace, no clothing, no footprints, no belongings, nothing. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed the children whole. NTHE case grew stranger as days turned to weeks. Witness accounts became muddled. Some insisted the children left the beach alone. Others swore they saw them walking with a mysterious blond man. Then came a chilling revelation. A neighbor told investigators that Jane had mentioned a new friend at the beach days before the disappearance, suggesting that this man may have been grooming them slowly, gaining their trust until the right opportunity arose. This possibility devastated the Beaumont parents, who had raised their children in what they thought was a safe, trusting environment. Rumors and theories multiplied as the months turned to years. Some believed the children had drowned, but the lack of bodies or belongings dismissed that theory. Others suggested abduction by a pedophile ring, or that the children had been murdered and buried in the sand dunes or construction sites nearby. In 1968, 2 years after the disappearance, Dutch clairvoyant Gerard Croisset was brought to Adelaide in desperation. He claimed the children were buried under a warehouse foundation. A massive excavation was carried out, but again, nothing. The case slipped further into legend, each failure compounding the parents' agony. And over the decades, the police pursued countless leads. In the 1970s, convicted child killer Derek Percy was considered a suspect, but there was no hard evidence tying him to the Beaumont case. In the 1990s, child abuser Bevan Spencer von Einem became the focus, linked to a series of murders known as the family murders. But again, no definitive proof surfaced. Even as recently as 2018, A dig was carried out at a property once owned by businessman Harry Phipps, another suspect known for predatory behavior, after claims that he had instructed workmen to dig a large hole on the day of the disappearance. The excavation revealed only animal bones and trash. The case remains as cold as the day it began, yet it continues to hold Australia in a grip of sorrow and fascination. For Jim and Nancy Beaumont, life after that day was one of unbearable grief. Their marriage dissolved under the weight of guilt and suspicion, each blaming themselves in some unspoken way. Neither parent ever truly found closure. Nancy died in 2019 at the age of 92, still waiting for answers that never came. Jim, too, passed away years earlier, having lived with the burden of silence and unanswered questions. NTHE, disappearance of Jane, Arna, and Grant Beaumont, shattered the innocence of an entire nation. Before 1966, Australia was considered a place where children could roam safely, but after that day, parental vigilance tightened, and a shadow of fear crept into daily life. It remains one of the most infamous child abduction cases in history, not only because of its tragedy, but because of how little evidence was left behind. The most chilling aspect of the Beaumont case is the haunting possibility that the children trusted their abductor, believed him to be a friend, and went willingly into whatever fate awaited them. Until this day, the question persists: who was the man on the beach, and what did he do with the Beaumont children? Without bodies, without confessions, without forensic evidence, the truth remains buried under the sands of time. Each new theory brings with it a flicker of hope, yet the trail grows colder with every passing year. The case stands as a painful reminder that evil often wears the face of trust, and sometimes the most devastating crimes leave behind nothing but silence. Brandon Lawson's disappearance in 2013 remains one of the most haunting and bizarre missing person cases in modern American history, not only because of the circumstances leading to his vanishing, but because of the frantic 911 call he made before he disappeared. A call that continues to baffle investigators and internet sleuths to this day. Brandon was a 26-year-old father of 4 living in San Angelo, Texas. By all accounts, he was hardworking, loved his family, but also struggled with personal demons, including substance use. On the night of August 8, 2013, Brandon and his longtime girlfriend, Ladessa Lofton, had a heated argument at their home. Tensions escalated, and Brandon decided to leave the house to cool off. He got into his silver Ford F-150 pickup truck and drove away into the dark Texas night, heading north on U.S. Route 277 toward Abilene. What happened over the next few hours turned this ordinary night into one of the strangest unsolved mysteries of the decade. Sometime after 12:30 a.m. on August 9th, Brandon called his father to tell him he was coming over. But during his drive, his truck ran out of gas near Bronte, Texas, leaving him stranded in the middle of the highway. He called his brother, Kyle, asking him to bring a gas can. But then, Brandon also placed a chilling 911 call at 12:50 a.m., which has since become infamous for its eerie and cryptic content. In the call, Brandon's voice is panicked and fragmented. as if he were running, whispering, or hiding. Among his words, investigators and online listeners have debated endlessly over what exactly he said. Some interpretations suggest he said, "Yes, I'm in the middle of a field. I ran into some guys. They're chasing me." Others claim he mentioned something about bleeding, being in the woods, or that someone was after him. The static and unclear quality of the call only added to the confusion. When police responded to the scene, they found Brandon's truck abandoned on the side of the road, but there was no sign of Brandon himself. The doors were unlocked, and his phone, wallet, and keys were missing. The area surrounding the highway was rugged, filled with thick brush, rattlesnakes, and prickly terrain. A deputy did not initially treat the situation as a crime, but assumed Brandon had simply wandered off into the night. Kyle, his brother, later arrived with a gas can, but Brandon was nowhere to be seen. Despite repeated attempts to call him, Brandon did not answer his phone again after the frantic 911 call. In the weeks that followed, police, family members, and volunteers scoured the area on foot, on horseback, and with helicopters. But no trace of Brandon was found. Search dogs tracked his scent from the truck into a nearby field, where the trail abruptly ended. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. Some searchers suggested that he may have succumbed to the elements, perhaps disoriented and dehydrated in the Texas heat. Others believed something far more sinister had happened. Theories swirled. Some pointed to foul play, suggesting Brandon may have been attacked by individuals he mentioned in his 911 call. Others speculated he could have been hallucinating due to drug use, which could explain his disoriented state and bizarre behavior. There were even theories about police involvement, as Brandon's 911 call included words some interpreted as a reference to the state troopers. However, investigators found no solid evidence linking law enforcement to his disappearance. The most frustrating part for his family was that the case quickly went cold, with no body, no further evidence, and no answers. For years, Brandon's disappearance haunted online communities, sparking endless debates, podcasts, and true crime investigations. His family never stopped searching and pleading for help. Then, in February 2022, nearly 9 years after his disappearance, searchers discovered human remains near the location where his truck had been abandoned. Subsequent DNA analysis confirmed that the remains belonged to Brandon Lawson. Yet, while this discovery finally gave his family the closure of knowing what happened to his body, it provided little clarity about how he died, or why his final night played out in such a disturbing and mysterious way. NTHE 911 call remains one of the most chilling artifacts in true crime history. The desperation in Brandon's voice, the cryptic words about chasing and bleeding, and the eerie silence that followed have left a lasting mark on all who listen. Even with the recovery of his remains, the case raises more questions than it answers. Was Brandon truly in danger from someone else that night, or was he hallucinating and lost to the elements? Why did his words sound so panicked if no one else was there? And why did it take nearly a decade to recover his body so close to where the ordeal began? Brandon Lawson's story is not only about a man who disappeared, but about the haunting legacy of his final call for help. It is a case where the facts blur into speculation, where the absence of clarity feels like its own kind of horror. To this day, even with the discovery of his remains, the mystery of what truly happened to him on that desolate Texas highway remains unresolved, an unsolved case that chills anyone who dares to listen to his last words. On the night of February 13th, 2000, in Shelby, North Carolina, a storm swept through the quiet town. For most families, it was just another cold and rainy winter night, but for the Degree family, it was the last night they would ever see their 9-year-old daughter, Asha, safe at home. What makes this case one of the most haunting in American history is that Asha did not vanish from school, a playground, or while walking down the street. Instead, she disappeared after willingly leaving her house in the dead of night, carrying a backpack, and walking into a storm, never to be seen again. Asha was described as bright, shy, and well-loved. Her parents, Aquila and Harold Degree, were devoted to keeping their children safe, instilling discipline, faith, and structure into their lives. Unlike many missing child cases, there was no chaos in the home, no neglect, no broken background. Asha's life was stable. On the night of her disappearance, the Degrees had celebrated Valentine's Day weekend with family. Asha and her brother O'Brien went to bed around 8 p.m. after a long day that included a basketball game. Around midnight, a power outage hit the neighborhood, but power returned within the hour. At 2:30 a.m., Harold checked on the children after returning home from work, and both Asha and her brother were asleep in their shared room. But at some point between 2:30 and 4 a.m., Asha quietly packed a few belongings into her backpack and left the house. She took with her some clothes and personal items, but left behind other essentials, suggesting she was not planning to vanish permanently. NBY 4 a.m., drivers along North Carolina Highway 18 spotted a young girl matching Asha's description walking alone in the pouring rain. One driver turned his car around to check on her, but when he approached, Asha bolted into the woods and vanished into the darkness. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. When the Degrees awoke later that morning and discovered Asha missing, panic set in. Police were immediately called, and a massive search began. Within 48 hours, search teams had combed through the woods and fields near where she was last seen. A few of her belongings, a hair, bow, and pencil, were discovered along the roadside. Despite intense community support and national media attention, no sign of Asha was found. And over a year later, in August 2001, construction workers uncovered her backpack, double-wrapped in plastic, buried off Highway 18 in Burke County, about 26 miles from her home. Inside were clothes that did not belong to her. This chilling discovery raised far more questions than answers. Who buried the backpack? Why was it so far from where she was last seen? And how did Asha, a child with no history of running away, end up in such a dangerous situation? Theories began to swirl. Some believed Asha had been lured or groomed by someone she met previously, though she had no access to the internet at the time, making such contact less likely. Others speculated she left home due to stress or a child's misunderstanding of discipline, perhaps believing she was in trouble after her basketball team lost the game the previous day. The most chilling possibility remains that she was intercepted by a predator while walking alone in the storm. And in 2015, the FBI announced new leads in the case, stating that Asha may have been spotted getting into a dark green 1970s model Ford Thunderbird or Lincoln Mark IV along Highway 18. Later, in 2020, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age-progressed image showing what Asha might look like at age 29, keeping her face in the public consciousness. Despite these developments, no arrests have been made, and no definitive answers have surfaced. Her parents, who have never stopped searching, hold an annual walk on the anniversary of her disappearance, tracing the path they believe their daughter took that fateful night. For them, hope is all that remains, hope that she might still be alive, hope that someone knows something, and hope that the truth will one day emerge. NTHE disappearance of Asha Degree remains one of the most haunting unsolved cases of the 21st century, not only because of the bizarre circumstances of a 9-year-old girl walking out of her home into a storm, but because of the silence that followed. She seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving behind only scattered clues and a mystery that still confounds investigators. Her story is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying vanishings happen not in faraway places, but in the quiet moments of ordinary family life. On the night of August 8, 2013, 26-year-old Brandon Lawson vanished along a remote stretch of Highway 277 near Bronte, Texas. His case remains one of the most disturbing and baffling modern missing persons mysteries, in large part because of the chilling 911 call he made shortly before disappearing, a call filled with confusion, fear, and words that continue to haunt investigators and internet sleuths to this day. Brandon was a young father of 4 who lived with his longtime girlfriend Ladessa Lofton. That night, Brandon and Ladessa had an argument at home, reportedly about personal stresses in their relationship. Around 11:53 p.m., Brandon left the house, driving his silver Ford F-150 truck. He told Ladessa he was heading to his father's house in Crowley, about 3 hours away, but something about the night unraveled quickly. At 12:34 a.m., Brandon called his brother Kyle, explaining that he had run out of gas along Highway 277 near Bronte. Kyle and his girlfriend agreed to bring him fuel. However, during this time, Brandon also made several frantic phone calls, including one to 911 that has since become infamous. In the 911 recording, Brandon's voice sounds distressed and panicked. He tells the operator N, "Yes, I'm in the middle of a field. I pulled some guys over right here going toward Abilene, on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. There's one car here. The guy's chasing me through the woods. Please hurry." NTHE operator attempted to get more details, but Brandon's words were scattered and at times hard to understand. Some portions of the call are still debated today. Was he saying, "I ran into them," or "I ran from them"? Was he describing multiple pursuers, or was his speech simply slurred from stress, fatigue, or something else? NBY 12:50 a.m., a sheriff's deputy found Brandon's truck abandoned, still on the highway shoulder. The truck had no gas, but it showed no signs of damage or foul play. Strangely, Brandon was nowhere to be found. Kyle and his girlfriend arrived around the same time, but when they tried calling Brandon, his phone would ring once and then go dead. According to Kyle, he briefly spoke with Brandon by phone during the search. Brandon reportedly told him he was 10 minutes up the road and that he was bleeding. After that, communication dropped. Law enforcement searched the area, but they treated the disappearance at first as a voluntary walk-off, not immediately recognizing the seriousness of the situation. In the days that followed, extensive searches were carried out in the fields and brush surrounding Highway 277. Despite helicopters, dogs, and hundreds of volunteers combing the rugged terrain, no trace of Brandon was found. His wallet, keys, and phone were missing as well. Theories soon took root. Some believed Brandon had encountered foul play, possibly attacked by unknown individuals he referenced in his 911 call. Others suggested he may have been hallucinating or disoriented, though friends and family deny any significant drug use that would explain such paranoia. Another theory holds that Brandon may have tried to hide from perceived pursuers, becoming lost in the wilderness, where heat, exhaustion, or injury claimed him. NFOR years. His disappearance remained one of the most discussed cold cases online. The 911 call continues to be analyzed word by word, as listeners debate what exactly Brandon was trying to say in those final moments of contact. His family never stopped searching, raising awareness and organizing volunteer searches along the highway and nearby land. In 2022, nearly 9 years after his disappearance, partial human remains were discovered in the area where Brandon was last seen. In early 2023, DNA testing confirmed the remains belonged to Brandon Lawson. While this provided some closure to his family, it still left the biggest questions unanswered. What exactly happened that night? Who, if anyone, was chasing him? And why did he sound so terrified on that 911 call? NTO this day, Brandon Lawson's disappearance, and the haunting recording he left behind, stands as one of the eeriest and most unsettling unsolved missing persons cases. It reminds us that sometimes, even when answers come, the truth remains elusive. On the morning of February 14, 2000, while most children in Shelby, North Carolina were still tucked safely in their beds, 9-year-old Asha Jakia Degree vanished under circumstances that remain as perplexing as they are heartbreaking. More than 2 decades later, her case still chills investigators and families alike, not only because she disappeared without a trace, but because of the bizarre and inexplicable details that surround her final known movements. Nasha was described as a shy, intelligent, and cautious little girl who loved school, basketball, and reading. Her family lived in a modest home on Oakcrest Drive, and by all accounts, Asha had a happy and stable upbringing. She was not the type of child anyone would expect to run away, but in the early hours of that cold Valentine's Day morning, she did something that shocked everyone who knew her. NTHE night before February 13th had been ordinary. Asha's parents, Harold and Aquila, tucked their children into bed after a family evening. Around 2:30 a.m., Harold checked on Asha and her brother, O'Brien, and both were sound asleep. But sometime between 2:30 and 4 a.m., Asha quietly left her bed, dressed herself in a long-sleeved shirt and jeans, grabbed a small black book bag she had packed with clothes and personal items, and slipped out into the night. Between 3:30 and 4:15 a.m., multiple motorists reported seeing a small figure walking along Highway 18 in the pouring rain. One truck driver recalled turning around to check on her, but the girl darted off into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. Those were the last confirmed sightings of Asha alive. When her parents discovered her missing at 6:30 a.m., panic erupted. Police, family, and neighbors immediately searched the area, but there were no signs of Asha. Her book bag, shoes, and personal belongings were not found near the house or along the road, raising questions about how far she could have gone on her own. NTHE first break in the case came a year later, when Asha's book bag, wrapped in a plastic bag, was discovered buried in the ground off Highway 18, nearly 26 miles from her home. Inside were some of her clothes, a pencil case, and a New Kids on the Block t-shirt that didn't belong to her. The location and condition of the bag suggested someone else had hidden it there. Despite massive searches, interviews, and FBI involvement, the mystery deepened. Why did Asha leave her home voluntarily, in the middle of the night, in the rain, without telling anyone? Some investigators believe she may have been lured by someone she knew and trusted, possibly groomed over time. Others theorize she had read or heard something that inspired her to set out on her own adventure. A tragic misstep that led her into danger. NHER case has continued to haunt her community. Every year on February 14th, her family organizes a walk in her memory, retracing her last known steps along Highway 18 in hopes of keeping her story alive. In 2015, the FBI announced they had received new leads and information pointing to possible suspects, but no arrests have ever been made. In 2020, the FBI released images of items found with her bag, including that mysterious t-shirt, hoping someone might recognize them and come forward. NTWO decades later, Asha Degree's disappearance remains one of the most haunting missing persons cases in America. Unlike many others, her case stands out because she was so young, so cautious by nature, and because she disappeared not from a dangerous environment, but from the safety of her own home in a quiet town. NTO this day, her parents continue to believe that their daughter is still alive, somewhere. They keep her room the same, waiting for the day she might come home. And each Valentine's Day, instead of celebration, they mourn the mystery of the little girl who walked into the rain and was never seen again. On the night of May 14, 2008, 19-year-old college student Brandon Swanson disappeared in a way that has puzzled investigators and haunted his family for more than a decade. His case is infamous not just because he vanished without a trace, but because he was on the phone with his parents at the very moment he disappeared, and his final words remain a chilling mystery. Brandon was a typical teenager from Marshall, Minnesota, studying wind energy at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. On the night of May 13th, he attended a small party with friends in Canby, a town about 30 miles away. Around midnight, he left the gathering to head home. He wasn't intoxicated, and by all accounts, he was in good spirits, joking with friends before setting off on the drive back. NBUT at around 1:15 a.m., Brandon's car became stuck in a ditch along a gravel road in a rural area. Unable to free the vehicle, he called his parents, Brian and Annette Swanson, for help. They immediately drove out to the location he described. Here's where things turned strange. Brandon was absolutely convinced he knew where he was. He told his parents he was near the town of Lind, just 10 minutes from their home. But when they drove out to the spot, he was nowhere to be found. The two parties tried flashing their headlights at one another, hoping to catch sight of each other in the darkness, but neither saw anything. Still on the phone with his parents, Brandon decided to start walking toward what he believed were the lights of Lind. He remained calm, chatting with his father as he walked. For nearly 47 minutes, the two stayed on the line. Brandon described passing fences, gravel roads, and even mentioned hearing water nearby. His father reassured him, promising they would figure it out soon. Then, suddenly, Brandon cried out, "Oh, SHT," and the line went dead. At first, his parents thought his phone had simply lost signal, but repeated calls went unanswered. They searched the area frantically, driving roads for hours, but there was no trace of him. The next day, law enforcement joined the search. They found Brandon's car, exactly where he said it was. But there were no footprints leading away, no signs of a struggle, nothing. Over the following days, hundreds of volunteers combed fields, ditches, and farmland. Cadaver dogs traced his scent to a nearby riverbank along the Yellow Medicine River, suggesting he may have fallen into the water. But extensive searches of the river turned up no body, no clothing, no phone, and no backpack. Theories about what happened to Brandon abound. Some believe he accidentally drowned after falling into the river, though no remains were ever found. Others suggest he may have climbed out of the water and succumbed to hypothermia in the fields. Still others argue something more sinister may have occurred, that someone came across Brandon in the dark and harmed him after the phone call ended. What makes the case so disturbing is the sense of immediacy. His parents were on the phone with him until the final moment, and his sudden exclamation, followed by silence, has never been explained. Investigators believe his last words were likely a reaction to something immediate and dangerous, a fall, an animal encounter, or possibly running into someone unexpected. Years later, the Swanson family remains without answers. Brandon's disappearance led to the passage of Brandon's Law in Minnesota, requiring police to begin immediate investigations into missing adults, regardless of whether foul play is suspected. A direct response to the delays and jurisdictional confusion the family faced that night. Despite the new law, despite thousands of hours of searching, Brandon Swanson's body has never been recovered. His phone has never been found, and his fate remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in modern America. On the evening of February 9, 2004, 21-year-old nursing student Maura Murray vanished in New Hampshire under circumstances so baffling that her case has become one of the most notorious missing persons mysteries in America. For 2 decades, her story has haunted investigators, her family, and thousands of amateur sleuths who still debate what really happened that cold winter night. Maura was a bright, athletic young woman from Hanson, Massachusetts. She had been a standout track runner in high school and was pursuing a nursing degree at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. But beneath the surface, her life in the weeks leading up to her disappearance was unraveling. She had been caught using a stolen credit card, had recently crashed her father's car, and was reportedly struggling with both academic and personal pressures. Friends later described her as overwhelmed and secretive in the days before she vanished. On February 9th, Maura abruptly emailed her professors, claiming she had to miss class for a week because of a family emergency. A lie, since no emergency existed. She then packed up her car with clothes, toiletries, textbooks, and even a stuffed animal. Before leaving campus, she searched the internet for directions to Vermont and New Hampshire, and for lodging in the White Mountains NBY late afternoon. Maura was driving north in her black Saturn sedan. Just before 7:30 p.m., on a rural stretch of Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, her car skidded off the road and crashed into a snowbank. Several local residents saw the accident and offered assistance. A school bus driver, Butch Atwood, stopped and asked if she needed help. Maura declined, insisting she had already called AAA, though phone records later showed she had not. Atwood drove home and called the police to report the crash. When law enforcement arrived minutes later, Maura's car was still there, but she was gone. Inside the vehicle were personal belongings, her packed clothes, textbooks, her cell phone charger, and a box of wine she had purchased earlier that day. The airbags had deployed in the crash, but there was no blood or obvious injury. Strangely, her debit cards, credit cards, and cell phone were missing, and have never been used since. A massive search began almost immediately, combing the snow-covered woods, nearby rivers, and surrounding areas with dogs, helicopters, and volunteers. Dogs tracked her scent only about 100 yards east from the crash site before losing the trail completely, as though she had either entered another vehicle or vanished into thin air. And over the years, countless theories have emerged. Some believe Maura fled deliberately, overwhelmed by stress, and began a new life under a false identity. Others argue she succumbed to the freezing weather, lost in the woods after fleeing the scene of the accident. A darker theory suggests she may have been picked up by a stranger or someone she knew and met with foul play, NBUT. What makes Maura's case so unsettling are the layers of unanswered questions. Why did she tell professors she had a family emergency? Why pack her belongings as if she intended to be gone for a long time, but leave behind almost everything in the car? Why did she refuse help from a passerby, claiming she had already called for assistance when she hadn't? Adding to the mystery, in the years since her disappearance, there have been numerous unverified sightings of Maura across the country, tips that led nowhere, and even possible links to other unsolved cases. Yet no evidence has ever surfaced, no body, no confirmed possessions, no digital footprint, Maura's family has never stopped searching, organizing countless vigils and searches in the New Hampshire woods. Her father, Fred Murray, has remained vocal, insisting foul play was involved and that someone in the area knows more than they've admitted. And 20 years later, Maura Murray's disappearance remains one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in the United States. It is a case that sits at the intersection of tragedy, speculation, and haunting silence, where a young woman seemed to simply walk off the edge of the world, leaving behind only questions and a grieving family desperate for closure.